I always thought I knew my wife, Rebecca. We'd been married for 12 years, had 3 kids, and shared countless quiet nights together. I thought that was enough, that the trust we built was unshakable. That was until the night I noticed something was different. Rebecca, a professor at the university, had always been passionate about her work. But recently it seemed like she was consumed by it, more than usual. Her smile faded when she spoke to me, and her eyes were distant, like she was never really here. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something was off. At first, I chalked it up to the stress of her new book launch. Rebecca always did this, plunged into her work when something was troubling her. But what troubled me most was her increasing secrecy. She was slipping away, pulling away from me, and I felt powerless to stop it. One evening I came home early from work. The house was unusually quiet. No kids running around, no dinner sizzling in the kitchen. I found Rebecca in the living room, pacing nervously. Her phone buzzed constantly in her hand, and when she saw me, her expression flickered. "Oh, hey," she said, her voice too light, too quick. "I didn't expect you home so soon." I could tell she was trying to hide something. But what? She smiled at me, but it didn't reach her eyes. Something wasn't right. The next day, I made a choice I didn't want to make. I installed a small, discreet camera in the corner of our living room. It was meant to be for security, of course, though I didn't tell Rebecca that. If she was hiding something, I would find out. That evening, I sat down on the couch, trying to play it cool, as if everything was normal. But as Rebecca moved around, checking her phone, I saw it again, the way her hand trembled as she typed, the way her eyes flickered to the window every time a car passed by. I watched her all evening, unable to shake the feeling that she was slipping through my fingers. What was she doing? Who was she talking to? The truth hit me like a punch to the gut the next morning. Rebecca wasn't the woman I thought I knew. She wasn't hiding just work stress from me. There was someone else. The first real sign of what was happening came on a Saturday afternoon. Rebecca had been unusually distant for weeks, and I decided I needed answers. After the kids went to a friend's house, I had the house to myself with Rebecca for a few hours. I had been patient, but the patience had worn thin. It was early, and I was still processing the unease I felt the night before. I casually asked, "Rebecca, do you think we could talk for a bit?" She looked up from her phone, her face pinched, as though she had already rehearsed the excuses she would give. "Of course," she said, but I saw the slight hesitation in her eyes. Something was definitely wrong. I wasn't prepared for what came next, but maybe I should have been. "Is everything all right with us?" I asked, my voice even. But the calmness in my tone was betraying the storm inside me. Rebecca blinked, looking taken aback by the question. "Of course," she said quickly. "Why wouldn't it be?" I hesitated, not wanting to scare her off, but I couldn't hold back anymore. "You've been acting different lately. I don't know how to explain it, but I feel like you're slipping away from me. You've been distant. Secretive. I need to know what's going on, Rebecca." Her lips parted, and for a brief moment, I saw the flash of guilt cross her face, before it was replaced with defensive anger. "What are you insinuating?" she asked, her voice rising slightly. "I've been working hard, and yes, I've been stressed, more than usual. But that doesn't mean you get to question everything I do." I stood up from the chair, pacing now. "No, it's not just the stress. It's the way you act when you think I'm not looking. The way you take calls outside, hide your phone from me. Who are you talking to, Rebecca? Tell me. Please." Her gaze flicked to the door, as if contemplating an escape. "I don't have to explain myself to you," she snapped, her tone bitter. "I don't know what's gotten into you." I felt the knot in my stomach tighten, the frustration rising. "Then why the secrecy? You've changed. And I don't think it's just work stress anymore. I'm not stupid." She stood up quickly, her face red with anger. "You don't trust me. I can't believe you're accusing me of something like this after everything we've been through. I can't even have my own life without you breathing down my neck." My pulse quickened, and I tried to keep my voice steady. Rebecca, I need to know. Who are you hiding from me? What's going on? This is not the woman I married. Rebecca turned away, her hands clenched at her sides, and I could see the tears threatening in her eyes. I wasn't sure if they were from anger or guilt or something else entirely, but I wasn't about to back down. I can't tell you right now, she muttered, almost to herself, her voice breaking. Just give me some time, okay? Time? I repeated, incredulity creeping into my voice. How much time do you need to tell me the truth? Rebecca spun around, looking at me with wild, frantic eyes. I'm not the person you think I am. You don't understand. I don't know how to fix this, Ryan. I don't know how to make things right with us. The words hit me like a physical blow. The silence between us was deafening, and I felt my chest tighten. There was something deeply wrong here, something beyond just a misunderstanding, beyond a rough patch in our marriage. The truth settled on me with a crushing weight. Rebecca wasn't just stressed or overwhelmed by work. She wasn't just too tired for me. She had been hiding something, someone. I was determined to find out what that was. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the dark, staring at the walls, my mind racing. The next morning, I knew what I had to do. The camera I'd set up in the living room had been recording more than I realized. What I saw that morning shattered whatever was left of my trust in her. I pulled up the footage from the previous night. Rebecca wasn't home alone. She was with someone else. A man. A student. One I recognized from the university where she worked. I'd seen him in passing once or twice, but I couldn't remember his name. I wasn't sure if it mattered anymore. The camera caught the moment when Rebecca opened the front door just after 10 p.m. He was standing there, a man in his late 20s, with a nervous smile. She pulled him into a hug that was far too long, far too intimate. Then, the door closed behind them. My stomach twisted, and I couldn't stop watching. They didn't even try to hide it. I watched as they sat together on the couch, talking too closely. At one point, his hand rested on her leg, and she didn't pull away. A chill ran down my spine. It wasn't just a visit. It wasn't just a friendly chat. I felt like I was losing control of everything I thought I knew about my wife. I couldn't confront her yet, not without more proof. Not with my suspicions hanging in the air like an unfinished question. I needed more. But that day, I made a decision. I would get my answers. I would uncover the truth, no matter how much it hurt. The days that followed felt like a blur of tension and quiet dread. I couldn't unsee what I'd witnessed on that camera. The image of Rebecca and that student, sitting so close, laughing together, it was all I could think about. I knew now, with a cold certainty, that this wasn't some passing affair. No, this was a calculated betrayal, one that ran deeper than I had ever imagined. But I couldn't act on impulse. I had to gather more evidence, more pieces to the puzzle. The camera footage was damning, but it wasn't enough to destroy everything I had built with Rebecca. I needed something irrefutable. I spent the next few days following her. I wasn't proud of it, but I had no choice. Every time she left the house, I made sure I knew where she was going. I tracked her movements, tailing her without her knowledge. She had grown so used to her routines, so confident in the fact that I wouldn't question her, that she didn't even think to look over her shoulder. One evening, after her class at the university, I followed her to a coffee shop. I sat across the street, barely able to breathe as I watched her meet him, another student. This time, I could hear snippets of their conversation from where I sat, my heart racing in my chest. Her laughter was a cruel reminder of everything I was losing. What was it about these students? What was so special about them that she needed to keep them in her life? Was I nothing more than an afterthought, a man who worked hard, came home every night, and gave her everything? What did I deserve after all of this? My phone buzzed, interrupting my spiraling thoughts. It was from my brother David. He wanted to meet. I didn't have time to process what that could mean, but I agreed anyway. A part of me needed to talk to someone. The weight of this secret was too much to bear alone. When I met David at the local pub that evening, he looked concerned, which wasn't like him. He had always been the golden child, the one everyone leaned on for advice, but tonight, his usual confidence seemed absent. "You okay, Ryan?" he asked, his voice low, as if sensing something was off. I stared into my drink, unsure of how to respond. "I'm not okay, Dave. I don't think I've been okay for a while now." David frowned, setting his beer down. "What's going on? You've been acting strange. Something's wrong with Rebecca?" I clenched my fists under the table, trying to hold back the flood of emotion threatening to consume me. I wanted to spill everything, the betrayal, the lies, the evidence I had, the way she had destroyed everything we had. But I couldn't. Not yet. "Something's wrong," I muttered. "I don't know how to explain it. I think she's been hiding something from me. Someone." David's eyes narrowed, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "What do you mean?" "Who?" I swallowed hard. "I think she's seeing someone. One of her students. And I've got proof. I've been watching her." David leaned back in his chair, his expression unreadable. "What do you want to do about it?" he asked, his tone sharp. I looked him straight in the eyes, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't know yet. But I can't just let it go. She's betrayed me, and I need to figure out what to do next." David nodded slowly, his brow furrowing. "Well, whatever you do, don't do anything rash. You need to think this through. I'm not going to lose my head over this," I snapped. But deep down, I knew I was already slipping. The foundation of everything I believed in was crumbling, and I couldn't stop it. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I scoured every piece of evidence I had gathered, the footage, the photos, the texts. I thought about what I should do. What would hurt her the most? What would show her just how much she had destroyed everything I cared about? I had to make her feel it. She had no idea that I was onto her, no clue that I had all the pieces of her lies. The next day, I made my decision. I would confront her in the most public way possible, at the dinner party we were planning for our family. It was supposed to be a simple gathering, a way to bring some light into our increasingly fractured family. But I wasn't going to let her walk away from this without understanding the consequences of her actions. I didn't tell David about the plan. He had made it clear he didn't want me to do anything hasty, but this wasn't a rash decision. This was calculated, and it had to happen. The night of the dinner arrived, and I kept my cool, pretending everything was fine. Rebecca didn't know that the camera had caught everything, that I had documented every conversation, every movement. Our guests arrived, the house filled with the sound of laughter and the clinking of glasses. Emily ran around, excited to have everyone there. Rebecca seemed on edge, but she did her best to mask it with that familiar, forced smile. But all I could think about was the moment when I would reveal everything, the moment when her world would shatter. As the night progressed, I waited for the perfect moment. When dessert was served and everyone was seated, I stood up, taking a deep breath. "Everyone," I said, my voice calm, "I'd like to say a few words." The room fell silent. Rebecca's smile faltered just a fraction as she looked up at me, but I didn't look at her. I couldn't. Instead, I focused on everyone else in the room, my family, the people who had no idea what was really going on behind the scenes. Family is everything to me. I began, keeping my voice steady. It's about trust, love, and support. But when that trust is broken, everything changes. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. Rebecca stiffened, her eyes narrowing. "Rebecca," I continued, turning toward her, "you've been hiding something from me for a while now. Someone. A man. And I think it's time everyone knows the truth about what's been happening behind closed doors." The room went completely still. Rebecca's face went pale. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the TV. The footage I had recorded, her with that student, played out on the screen for everyone to see. Rebecca stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "Ryan, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "You don't have to do this. It's not what you think. I cut her off, my voice cold. No, it's exactly what I think. You've betrayed me, and now everyone knows. You don't get to hide anymore. The room was filled with gasps. Her family, our friends, they were all in shock, unsure how to process what they had just seen. Rebecca crumpled, tears streaming down her face. Please, Ryan, I'm sorry. Please, just let me explain. But I had no words left for her. The chaos that followed my revelation was deafening. For a moment, it felt like I was watching someone else's life unfold before my eyes. I couldn't feel the floor beneath me, couldn't hear the frantic whispers filling the room. The reality of what I had done, of what had been revealed, hung heavy in the air, pressing down on everything. Rebecca was shaking. Her face was streaked with tears, her breath ragged as she tried to explain herself to the room. Ryan, please, you don't understand, she cried, her voice breaking. This wasn't supposed to happen. It was a mistake. I made a mistake. But I wasn't listening anymore. I couldn't. The words felt like poison, the same hollow apologies I had heard too many times before. And there, in the center of it all, was Emily, my daughter, the one person I was trying to protect from all of this. Her wide eyes, full of confusion, looked back and forth between Rebecca and me. Daddy? Emily asked, her voice small, almost lost in the tension. Why is Mommy crying? Why are you mad at her? I felt my heart shatter. She didn't understand. She couldn't understand. Not at her age. Sweetheart, I said, forcing myself to speak through the lump in my throat. Mommy made some choices that hurt our family. She made a mistake, but it's not your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. Rebecca stepped forward, but I held up my hand, stopping her. No, I said firmly, my voice unwavering. You don't get to pull Emily into this. Not now. Rebecca faltered, her eyes flicking back to Emily, then to the floor. The room was suffocating, filled with the weight of the truth that could no longer be hidden. I turned to face our guests, our family, our friends. The ones who had come to celebrate, to share a meal, and now found themselves in the midst of a personal tragedy. My voice was calm, almost eerily so, as I addressed them all. This is the truth, I said, my gaze sweeping over the room. Rebecca has betrayed my trust. And I'm done. This marriage is over. I'm not going to live in a lie anymore. Rebecca's face contorted in shock and desperation. Ryan, please! Don't do this in front of everyone. Please, let's go talk privately. I shook my head, cutting her off once more. No. There's no more talking. You made your choices, Rebecca, and now you'll face the consequences. The silence that followed was suffocating. Rebecca's parents, who had been sitting in stunned silence, exchanged looks, as if unsure whether to comfort her or remain silent. I saw the disbelief on their faces, and for a moment, a twisted part of me wondered if they were more concerned about her embarrassment than the damage she had done to our family. But that wasn't my concern anymore. My concern was Emily. She didn't deserve any of this. She didn't deserve to witness this collapse, this crumbling of what she thought was her family. I knelt down to her, taking her hands in mine. Emily, I said softly, trying to steady my voice, I want you to know that no matter what happens, I'm always going to be here for you. Mommy and Daddy are going to figure things out, but you don't need to worry. You're safe. She nodded slowly, though her confusion was still evident in her eyes. Rebecca, still standing in the middle of the room, wiped her eyes furiously, her hands trembling. Ryan, please. I never meant for it to get this far. I never meant for it to hurt you this way, she said, the words spilling out like water from a broken dam. But I was done listening to her apologies. The lies had piled up for too long, and this was the moment where everything would come to light. I stood up, looking at Rebecca one last time. You don't get to hurt me anymore, I said, my voice low and firm. I've already contacted a lawyer. You'll be hearing from them soon. Her face crumpled further, and she took a shaky step toward me. Ryan, please. You don't have to do this. I'm still your wife. We can fix this. Her voice was desperate now, the tone more pleading than anything I had ever heard from her. But it wasn't my wife standing there anymore. It was someone who had betrayed everything we built, someone who thought she could have it all without facing the consequences. "I don't think you can fix this," I said, my words cutting deeper than I intended. "Not after everything you've done. You've already made your choice, Rebecca. And so have I." As I spoke those words, I realized something I hadn't fully grasped before. This wasn't just about the betrayal. It was about the end of a chapter, the painful recognition that the woman I had loved for so many years was gone. What was left of her now was just the remnants of broken promises and shattered trust. Rebecca stood there, frozen in disbelief, while I could feel the weight of everyone's gaze on me. But I didn't look away. I couldn't. "I've already made arrangements for Emily's custody," I said, my voice firm. "I'll be taking full custody. You'll get visitation rights, but I'm not letting you disrupt her life any more than you already have." Her face went ashen. "Ryan, no. Please don't do this. Don't take her from me. I need her." Her voice cracked, the guilt and panic in her tone unmistakable. "You don't get to say that after what you've done," I said, my anger rising. "You've already made your choices, and now you'll live with the consequences." David, who had been silent up until now, cleared his throat. "Ryan, maybe you should think about this," he said, his voice tentative. "I know you're hurt, but this is a huge decision." I turned to him, the hurt and anger still sharp in my chest. "You think I haven't thought about it? You think I haven't considered what this is doing to Emily? But she needs stability, David. She needs truth. She needs someone who's going to protect her from people like Rebecca." David didn't respond. He just stood there, shifting uncomfortably under my gaze. The rest of the evening was a blur. Rebecca's parents attempted to console her, but I could see in their eyes that they didn't know what to say, didn't know how to fix what was broken. Our guests slowly filtered out, their conversations hushed, their faces filled with pity or disbelief. As I looked around at the empty house, I felt a strange calm settle over me. It wasn't a relief, at least not yet. But it was the first step in regaining control over a life that had been ripped apart by lies and deceit. Rebecca stayed in the house that night. She cried herself to sleep in the guest room, but I didn't go to her. I couldn't. The next day, I made the calls to the lawyer, to arrange everything. I had a plan. It was time to move on, time to heal. And most importantly, it was time to protect Emily. She was the only thing that mattered now. The days after that dinner party were a blur of legal meetings, frantic phone calls, and endless paperwork. It felt like the world had shifted on its axis, leaving everything I had known and built behind. I didn't know what was worse, the sting of betrayal or the responsibility of putting together the shattered pieces of my life. Rebecca had moved out that same week, taking only a few bags of clothes and a handful of personal items. Her departure wasn't as dramatic as I had imagined. There were no screaming matches, no final desperate pleas. She just left. The house was quieter, emptier without her. The echoes of her absence lingered in the spaces she used to occupy. I could barely bring myself to walk into our bedroom. It felt like a crime scene, a place that had once been filled with warmth, laughter, and intimacy. Now it was just a hollow shell, a room where memories had been twisted into lies. Emily adjusted quickly to the new normal. She had always been resilient, but even at her age, I could tell this was a heavy burden for her to carry. She still didn't understand why Rebecca wasn't there every night, why things had changed so suddenly. I did my best to shield her from the worst of it. I told her that Mommy needed some time to figure things out. I kept it vague, not wanting to burden her with the truth. That first week without Rebecca felt like walking through a fog. I went through the motions, working from home, taking care of Emily, trying to pretend like everything was okay. But nothing was. I wasn't sure how long I could keep this up, but I couldn't afford to break down. Not now. Not when Emily needed me more than ever. The lawyer I had hired, Claire, was ruthless. She had already secured a temporary custody agreement that gave me primary custody of Emily, while Rebecca was granted supervised visitation. It was a far cry from what I had hoped for, but it was a start. The legal battle was far from over, but I felt confident knowing I had a strong case. The evidence was undeniable: Rebecca's affair, her lies, her disregard for everything we had built. It was hard to imagine a court siding with her after all that had come to light. Still, the road ahead was long. I spent my days buried in legal documents, and my nights trying to keep some semblance of normalcy for Emily. We spent time together, just the two of us, movie nights, trips to the park, bedtime stories. It was the only thing that kept me grounded, the only thing that reminded me of the life I had fought so hard to protect. But even in those quiet moments, I couldn't escape the weight of what had happened. The anger, the hurt, the betrayal, it all simmered beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to break free. One afternoon, just over a week after Rebecca had moved out, I got a call from Claire. Her voice was tight, her tone more serious than usual. "Ryan, I need to talk to you about something," she said. "There's been a development. Rebecca's lawyer has made an offer to settle." My stomach dropped. "Settle? What does that mean?" Claire paused before answering, her voice clipped. "It means they're offering a compromise, a negotiated agreement to avoid going to court. Rebecca's offering you a significant amount of child support, and in exchange, she wants shared custody. She's willing to make it official in writing that she'll stop any contact with the student, and she's agreed to attend counseling." I felt a knot form in my chest. The idea of shared custody felt like a betrayal in itself. How could I let her have access to Emily after everything? After what she'd done? My mind raced, thinking about all the ways she'd failed us. But then I remembered what Claire had said before: the court would look at the evidence, and if Rebecca fought me on custody, it would get ugly. I didn't want to drag Emily through that. "Let me think about it," I said, trying to steady my breath. "Take your time," Claire replied. "But remember, Ryan, you don't have to take this offer. You have the upper hand right now." I hung up the phone, my mind swirling. Rebecca's offer didn't feel like an apology. It felt like damage control. Like she was trying to buy her way back into my life, and into Emily's. But was I being unreasonable to consider it? Did Emily deserve to have a relationship with her mother? Was I doing the right thing by fighting for full custody? I spent the next few days in a haze, torn between the desire for revenge and the longing for peace. I knew I couldn't keep going like this, living in a constant state of anger and distrust. But could I ever forgive Rebecca? Could I ever trust her again? The decision weighed heavily on me. But as the days passed, I realized something. It wasn't just about Rebecca anymore. It was about Emily. It was about giving her the best life possible, even if it meant making difficult choices. I couldn't keep living in the past, constantly revisiting the betrayal. I needed to move forward. And that meant putting the past behind me, as much as it hurt. I made the call to Claire the next morning. I told her that I would consider Rebecca's offer, but I needed time to think about how to approach the shared custody arrangement. I didn't want to go to court if I didn't have to. But I couldn't make any promises about the future. "Understood," Claire said. "I'll draw up the paperwork for you to look over." As I hung up the phone, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't relief, not yet. But it was the first step in reclaiming control of my life. Rebecca's return to our lives was inevitable, but it would be on my terms now. And while I didn't know what the future held, I knew one thing for sure: I was going to protect Emily at all costs. After I made the call to Claire, things seemed to settle down, though not completely. The days dragged on as I processed the weight of everything that had happened. Rebecca's lawyer had sent over the settlement offer, and while I could feel the pressure mounting, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something wasn't right. I kept the offer on my desk, unable to open it just yet. It felt too much like a decision I couldn't undo, like signing away the last shred of trust one had left. Emily and I spent our days with our new routine, but I knew she could sense the tension. She was too perceptive for her own good. One evening, after we finished dinner, Emily climbed into my lap as we watched TV. Her small hand wrapped around my finger, and for the first time in a while, I felt some peace. But that peace was fragile, easily shattered by the thought of Rebecca's return. "I miss Mommy," Emily said softly, almost to herself. The words hit me like a slap. How could I explain to her that Mommy had made a choice to hurt us? That the love she once shared with me wasn't the same anymore? I kissed the top of Emily's head, trying to keep the tears from welling up. "I know, sweetie. But everything will be okay," I said, my voice steady, even if I didn't fully believe it. As the days passed, I couldn't shake the thoughts swirling in my head. The offer from Rebecca's lawyer sat untouched on my desk. Every time I glanced at it, I felt a wave of unease. Was it the right thing to do? Was it truly in Emily's best interest to have her mother back in her life, after everything that had happened? But then there were moments, like the one I had with Emily the night before, that made me doubt myself. She needed her mother, didn't she? She couldn't understand the full picture, the betrayal, the lies. She only saw that she missed Rebecca, that the family she once knew was broken. The thing that made it even harder was Rebecca's insistence on trying to fix everything. She had sent me message after message, pleading for another chance. Her words felt empty, rehearsed, as if she knew exactly what to say to tug at my heartstrings. But they were lies, all of them. She wasn't apologizing for what she had done to me. She was apologizing because she didn't want to lose Emily, and she didn't want to lose everything she had built. That was the part one couldn't reconcile. She wasn't sorry because she had hurt me, she was sorry because she was caught. The day I met with Claire again, I felt the weight of the decision pressing down on me. The settlement offer was still on the table, and Rebecca's desperation was palpable in every email, every call. But I had a choice to make, not just for myself, but for Emily. I looked across the table at Claire, my lawyer, who had been guiding me through every step of this painful process. She could see the conflict in my eyes. "You need to make a decision, Ryan," she said gently, her voice calm but firm. "You're in control here. Don't let her dictate your terms." I nodded, though I didn't feel in control at all. "I don't know if I can forgive her," I admitted, my voice thick. "I don't know if I can ever look at her the same way." The following week, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to accept the settlement offer without one final confrontation. I needed to look Rebecca in the eyes and hear her say, with no excuses, why she had done what she did. I needed her to face the consequences of her actions, something I didn't think she had fully grasped. I arranged to meet her at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in town. I didn't want to have this conversation in our home. I didn't want any more emotional baggage tied to the walls of the place that had once felt like our sanctuary. When I arrived, Rebecca was already sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup, her face pale. She looked tired, more tired than I had ever seen her. She was wearing the same expression she had worn the night she left: guilt, shame, and a strange sense of hopelessness. I sat down across from her, the tension thick between us. "Ryan," she began, her voice soft. "I didn't want this. I didn't want any of this to happen. You have to believe me." I stared at her, my anger still raw. "No, Rebecca. I don't believe you anymore. Not after everything that's happened. You lied to me. You lied to Emily. And now you expect me to just forgive you because you're sorry?" Her eyes welled up with tears, but I didn't feel the slightest ounce of pity. "It wasn't about you, Ryan," she said, her voice shaking. "I wasn't thinking. I was lost, and I let someone in that I shouldn't have. You think that makes it okay?" I asked, my voice rising despite myself. "You think I should just overlook it because you were lost? What about Emily, huh? What about the family we had? You tore that apart." Rebecca's face crumpled, and she finally let the tears fall. "I don't know what I was thinking," she sobbed, her voice breaking. "I made a terrible mistake. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything to make it right." I took a deep breath, trying to keep my emotions in check. This wasn't about her anymore. It wasn't about the apology I had been waiting for, it was about Emily. And about me. I don't know if I can trust you again, Rebecca, I said coldly. You had your chance. And you blew it. Rebecca looked at me, desperation in her eyes. Please, Ryan. I know I can never undo what I've done, but I can try. I want to be a better person, a better mother for Emily. Please don't take her from me. I clenched my fists under the table. I'm not doing this for you, I said, my voice low. I'm doing it for Emily. She deserves to feel safe. She deserves to have a mother who doesn't tear apart her family and lie to her. You don't get to play the victim here, Rebecca. The room fell silent, the weight of my words hanging in the air. I could see the hurt on Rebecca's face, but it didn't matter anymore. The damage had been done. The trust had been shattered beyond repair. I'm filing for full custody, I said finally, the decision feeling final. And no matter how much you beg, no matter how much you apologize, I'm not changing my mind. Rebecca sat there, her shoulders shaking, but she didn't argue. She knew, as I did, that it was over. The next few days were a blur. I filed the custody papers, and the storm that followed felt like an inevitability. Rebecca, in her desperation, tried to fight it, reaching out to me with emails and texts that became increasingly frantic. She begged, pleaded, and promised that she had changed, that she was ready to do whatever it took to fix things. But I couldn't bring myself to answer her anymore. The first hearing came quickly. I sat there, calm on the outside but raging within, as I watched Rebecca struggle to explain herself in front of the judge. Her voice cracked as she tried to make her case, her words faltering under the weight of her own guilt. I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. It wasn't about her. It was about Emily. And the judge seemed to agree. The evidence, everything I had documented, painted a clear picture of the betrayal that had torn our family apart. Rebecca's affair, the lies, the deception. It all came to light in that courtroom, and it was too much to ignore. By the end of the hearing, I had a temporary custody agreement in place, giving me full physical custody of Emily. Rebecca was allowed limited visitation, but it would be supervised. It wasn't the victory I had hoped for, it wasn't as simple as that, but it was a step forward. As I left the courthouse, Emily's hand in mine, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was only starting to rebuild. The weight of the battle wasn't over. The legal process would drag on for months, and I had no idea what the future would hold. But for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was doing what was right. For Emily. For us. The weeks that followed the hearing were difficult, but they were also the first real steps toward rebuilding our lives. I focused on keeping things as normal as possible for Emily, making sure she felt safe, loved, and supported. Every night, we had dinner together, followed by our favorite shows and bedtime stories. Those small routines became the anchors that kept us both grounded. Rebecca continued to fight. She didn't take the loss easily, and I knew she wouldn't. She petitioned for more visitation, claiming that supervised visits were too harsh. Her lawyer argued that she was capable of being a good mother, that the affair was a mistake she had learned from. But the truth was, nothing could erase the damage she had done. And no matter how much she tried to convince herself, and everyone else, of her remorse, I knew it wasn't enough. I kept Emily out of it as much as possible. I didn't want her to feel the strain of the legal battle, the arguments, the uncertainty. She still asked about Rebecca, about when things would go back to the way they were. And every time, I reminded her that things would be different, but that didn't mean they couldn't be good. We could build something new. Rebecca's supervised visits became more frequent, but every time she left, I could see the relief in Emily's eyes. She wasn't the same little girl she had been before all of this. There was a guardedness now, a hesitance in her smile, but she was adjusting. She was resilient. And I was, too. Slowly but surely, I was learning to forgive myself for the anger I had held on to for so long. I was learning that forgiveness wasn't about Rebecca. It was about freeing myself from the weight of betrayal. I had to move on, for Emily's sake, for my own. The day I finally signed the divorce papers was a quiet one. I didn't celebrate it, didn't feel victorious, but it marked the final chapter of a long, painful story. Rebecca and I were no longer tethered together by marriage, but our bond through Emily would remain. I wasn't sure where our relationship would go from here, whether we would ever be able to find a way to co-parent without the lingering bitterness, but I knew I had to try. As I signed the papers, I felt a strange sense of calm. The battle had been long, and the scars would never fully fade, but I was done with the past. I was focused on the future. Emily and I began to find our rhythm in the days that followed. We started planning little trips, weekend getaways to nearby parks, beach days, trips to the zoo. Things that made us smile again, that helped us rebuild our connection. I could see her blossoming, starting to laugh freely once more. And as for me, I learned that life could begin again. That even after everything had crumbled, there was still something worth fighting for. I didn't need Rebecca to find peace. I didn't need her to make it right. I had Emily, and that was enough. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.